Hello, bookworms. Welcome to the Weekend Readers Book Club. Thank you for joining us. In this episode, we are discussing the 2010 released 321-page thriller, if you want to call it that, novel entitled Room by Emma Donoghue. Room is a story of Jack, who is a 5-year-old, and he lives in a room. Can't go outside, has to stay inside. And the story is told through his eyes, how he experienced life in the room. And then outside of the room, when Jack finds himself outside in the real world. Okay, let's talk the room, what I liked, what I disliked about the book. And I will start this by saying, if you haven't read The Room and it's a book that you're about to read or you're on the fence to reading, I would say to you, stop the podcast, read the book, and then come back, as I may give away some of the plot points behind the story. And I don't mean to on purpose, it's just this book is very detailed and took me on a roller coaster, so for me to explain how I thought about the book, it will give away some of the story itself, okay? So, this book took me on a roller coaster, and Emma Donoghue, thank you very much. The way in which you wrote this book from the viewpoint of a 5-year-old is absolutely amazing. This book I split up, I read it chapter to chapter as per normal, but I sort of split the book up in two after reading it and thinking back to it, because I've got two sets of emotion towards the book, where the first set of emotions is very firm and angry towards the story, which is the time in which they are in the room, where you learn that Jack is 5, you learn his ma has been in there for some time, you learn that Jack was actually born in the room, and you meet the character Old Nick, who is the gatekeeper of the room, and much more that you learn in the story. This first part, say from page 1 to 197, when they're in the room, it was a little bit uneasy to start with, as I was trying to understand the way in which this book was written. 10 pages in, I sort of got the gist of it, as it is written from the 5-year-old's point of view, so some of the grammar is a bit off. Then you take me on a roller coaster where I'm intrigued about Jack's discovery. I'm mortified in relation to Old Nick's appearance and how that comes about, and how often that comes about, and why that comes about. In addition to that, by the end of them being in the room, I was just angry towards the Old Nick character, where I'm just like, you are an evil, evil piece of shit, and somebody needs to deal with you. And it was like just raw emotion, because I'm like, the fact that it's a woman and a 5-year-old trapped in this room, it's bonkers. From page 197 onwards, it's about discovery, especially for Jack in relation to experiencing life outside the world and his struggles to try and acclimatize, is that the right word? Acclimatize to the real world and take everything in for what it is, not for what he has known in the room. It was a great move from what the first half of the book was in relation to not so much plot points, but in relation to tone of the story. However, there is one part in the final 2 chapters where the mother, she gives up hope, and that's just completely heart-wrenching, where you're like, oh my gosh, you have gone through all of this as a woman to get to where you are now, and you're just giving up hope. And you did all this because of your child, but you're still giving up hope. And Emma Donoghue does a great way in telling the story, because It puts you right in the middle of things, especially from Jack's perspective, because he is the center point of everything that Ma does, but also the center point of everybody else that you're introduced into from when they, escape the room. That, yes, Ma's somewhat the center point because, yay, she's been found, but also it's like everybody's got to take into consideration that there is a child here, and his curiosity and development and the way in which he tackles life is completely different from any other 5-year-old they've seen because of the circumstances that he was raised in. This book, for me, is absolutely amazing. Like, I can't express how great this read was in transporting me into the story so I can have a first-hand idea of what's going on. And, my hat off to you, Emma Donoghue, because Room is an awesome book. Now, based on that, though, usually I would be saying this book would be going on to my bookshelf. However, Room by Emma Donoghue is such an emotional roller coaster where I'm glad I've read this, but I never want to read this book again. And I know that may sound terrible, but I'm like, no, I don't want to be put in that position in rereading this book again because it took me on a roller coaster and it transported me to a place where, you read it and you sit and you think going, damn, what would I do if I was in that position? And it's like, okay, I've got kids. What would I do if my kids and I were trapped in here? Like, it takes, it's such an amazing book, but it's so mind-bending and it's so emotionally draining. I'm like, thank you, but no thank you. So, Emma Donoghue, while your book is absolutely amazing, unfortunately it's not meeting my bookshelf as it just isn't a book that I will find myself rereading. However, I highly, highly recommend this if you haven't read it because it is such an outstanding book. Now, as it customs here on the Weekend Readers Book Club, as one book closes, another book has to open. And it is now time to find out what the next read on the Weekend Readers Book Club is. And Bookworms, we can confirm that the next read is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. Now, this book I was going to do as a special episode because I did the Coconut Children earlier in March as a special episode, but I thought, no, I'll just bring it into my normal rotation. This book, The Spanish Love Deception, was voted the 2021 Goodreads debut novel winner. So it's a debut book by a writer named Elena Armas. So The Spanish Love Deception, you are our next read. So that there is our discussion and review of The Room by Emma Donoghue, a book that was very heavy to read, if that makes sense, from an emotional and heartbreak, pull on the heartstrings standpoint. A book that I very, very much enjoyed reading. Unfortunately, I won't go back to. So I'm going to give Room by Emma Donoghue to another mate. As I got this off my mate Brian, I'm giving this to my mate Mike, who will hopefully give it a whirl. And hopefully we can just pass it around and get people reading this book because this book is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Brian. Thank you for recommending this book. So, Bookworms, if you'd like to get in contact with us, you can. You can follow us on our socials, Instagram, Weekend Readers Book Club. We also have our podcasts on, that you're listening to, on YouTube and any other podcast platform that you wish to use. Find us via The Weekend Readers. Until next time, thanks again for joining us. And Bookworms, Happy reading.